the Tohoku region at 2:46 when the quake hit.
Hi, I'm Ed Blakely. No one's prepared for the violence you just saw, no matter whether it's natural or man-made. We are not prepared for disaster.
We're going to be talking to John McDonough, a professor at Lincoln University in Christchurch, a person who's lived through this disaster and seen many disasters around the world. He has an interesting story to tell. Let's listen. We may inform how we can recover after our next disaster, no matter where it is.
John McDonough.
Yes.
John, you're at Lincoln University.
That's right, yeah.
And tell me, what is your background in the field?
Well, I'm Associate Professor of Property Studies here, so I teach basically the whole range of property-related courses, valuation, property development, property, corporate real estate, those sorts of things. But I have a background before I became an academic in property development, and my sort of research interest has been sort of like inner city revitalisation, and I was in the process of doing some of that to Christchurch when the earthquake struck, and so now I've been very much interested in post-earthquake inner city revitalisation issues.
Well, that brings us to this city, Christchurch, and Lincoln is in Christchurch.
Yes, yeah.
You've actually been on a study tour, as it were, of disasters.
Yes, it's been a bit of a disaster tour, really, in some ways.
Wasn't a disaster of a tour.
No, it was a fantastic experience. But I went last year. I went first of all to California and did an address basically to the Association of Bay Area Governments on Christchurch's earthquake disaster. But I went there because of the similar sort of earthquakes, disaster recovery situations that they've had to deal with over many years in California, and so spoke to a lot of people there who are from Berkeley and from the local government agencies, and from there I went down to Santa Cruz because that I was told was a relatively small scale Victorian area Main Street that was badly damaged and has basically recovered from the created earthquake. But then I went on to Italy to L'Aquila, where they had a major earthquake a few years before the Christchurch earthquake, and so I had a look at that and spoke to people about the disaster recovery in that Italian type context in a historic town. And then on the way back to New Zealand, I went via New Orleans, which wasn't an earthquake, but
flood, disaster,
same
kind of thing.
And it was interesting interesting just to compare the similarities and the differences between those sort of situations.
Well, in Christchurch, and I've seen a bit of Christchurch. I was here before the disaster, the 1st of September, and then the February, and now Christchurch is going through quite a profound recovery. What are some of the things that made this recovery work? First of all, what are you working on to bring the city back?
Well, I mean, what's basically happened in Christchurch is there's been the residential recovery phase, and then there's the central city recovery phase, and in some ways the residential side's been progressing more quickly than the downtown area for a variety of reasons. And large areas to the east of Christchurch which were subject to very bad liquefaction, have basically been what they call red zoned, and so the houses that were badly damaged in that part of the city are not going to be rebuilt.
And so are people being given funds to relocate to the east, or what's happening?
Basically, the government agreed to pay those people in the red zone to the east the value of their properties prior to the earthquake, and that's the value of the land, basically. And most of them who were insured would have been paid out by the insurance company for the value of the buildings, and so they've ended up with the value of their properties effectively to spend somewhere else. And so there's been a massive building boom further to the west of the city, where new housing is being built effectively to replace the 7,000 houses.
Now those houses that are being built further west, are they being built on the same kind of land that can be liquefied? Or?
No. The areas that were subject to liquefaction were basically sort of drained swampland.
Okay.
And what would they be moved? The new housing areas further to the west on much higher and better drained land. So the liquefaction is unlikely to.
So you're doing much like New Orleans, creating whole new neighborhoods.
That's right. They're very large scale, sort of like suburban subdivisions. There's been some criticism that basically they're just building back the same style of housing.
Yeah, but why build large scale subdivisions when we know that doesn't have much of a future? It's not fuel efficient. It's not even safe in terms of people knowing one another and neighborliness. What was the motivation?
I think part of the thing is in the New Zealand culture, that is what people know, and so that is what there hasn't really been much of an appetite for an alternative type of housing. I think one of the problems in New Zealand is that the more high density housing is just really not a common. It's an experience that a lot of people in New Zealand have never had, and so they haven't really sort of wanted to buy into that type of high density housing. It has been, there were attempts by the local authorities to try and encourage that type of housing, but essentially the policy here is to let the market decide, and people with the money that they got paid out from the insurance company and from the government have made the choice to basically buy the same sort of housing that they had before.
All right, let's turn to the central city.
Yeah.
Because the city is its heart, and the heart of this city had a great cathedral, and that cathedral is what the city's known for. What's going to happen in that territory?
Well, that's been one of the very divisive sort of arguments in Christchurch about the future of the Christchurch Cathedral, because the Anglican Church, who owned the cathedral, have wanted to demolish it, but there's been a very vociferous sort of campaign to try and save the cathedral. The part of the cathedral is relatively badly damaged at the front, but the body of the cathedral has got relatively minor damage. But there's been a lot of argument on both sides of the debate about whether it should be restored as it was, restored with some sort of like contemporary sort of changes, or demolished completely and a new cathedral being built. And because it's sort of like divided the community almost sort of evenly, I'd say 50-50 odd, and not much has happened really.
So you have a big piece of infrastructure, but you have another building that looks like a cathedral, your paper cathedral.
Oh, the cardboard cathedral.
Cardboard cathedral. What is that about?
Well, that was the Anglican Church took some of their insurance money from the damaged cathedral and decided they needed to have at least a temporary facility, so built on a different site, a much smaller but a building sort of using cardboard tubes basically by a Japanese architect to build a temporary sort of cathedral. And so that is being used, but the thing is that's always intended to be a temporary measure, but I mean obviously it's been there for quite a few years now.
So what else is going on in the downtown? That big building that the students were killed in, that's down, the ground is fallow there.
Yes.
What are some of the things that are coming back into the downtown?
Well, what happened was basically 75% of all the central city buildings have been demolished and the site's been cleared. There are the centre of the city came under the control of CERA, which is the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority. Mm-hmm. So they basically cordoned off the very centre of the city for a number of years while they developed a plan for what would happen in the central city. Now, that plan has been developed for some time now, and it's got some key precincts and areas where the government has agreed to fund particular infrastructure, such as a justice precinct for the courts and the police, emergency services. There's a hospital precinct that they're building new hospital facilities in. There's a convention centre district where they're building a new convention centre, and there's a innovation sort of like business incubator precinct, and some other sort of precincts, arts and culture sort of precinct. But the problem has been that there's been a lot of argument and debate about the design of the central city area, and in the meantime, a lot of the owners of property have taken their insurance payouts. The owners of properties in the central city taken their insurance payouts for their buildings, and a lot of them have either taken that money out of the city completely, or they had to be patient enough to wait around for the plans to be developed by the Earthquake Recovery Authority. So they've gone just outside the area that the earthquake recovery.
So you're creating a new downtown area?
Yes, well, there's sort of like a ring of developments around the outside of the central area, and so there's concerns that some of the demand for office space, for example, that would have come back into the central city is now being satisfied on the edge of the central city by new buildings that actually have already been constructed.
So has it been that Sarah, or whatever the name is, has acted too slowly, or is it not picked the right targets, or what's happening?
I think there's been a combination of issues. I mean, it has acted slowly, and there was early on there was conflict between CERA, the government agency, and the city council, and so there was a lot of there's been a lot of governance problems and who's in control and who's dictating the design of the central city area. So that held up progress for a long time. Then the CERA sort of stipulated that developments had to be of a particular size, and that meant that building owners had to aggregate sites together if they wanted to put forward a development in the central city, and some of them found that was too difficult. It was too difficult to aggregate sites. It was too difficult dealing with CERA or the city council, who were sometimes at loggerheads. So they basically just went outside of the area where they had to deal with those issues and built buildings there.
And they could just buy land there. They had no trouble buying land.
No, because in that area, their buildings were demolished in those areas as well, but the thing is it was outside of the control of CERA.
So what's happening now? When I was downtown, it seemed not to have a lot of life. There was some interesting buildings and some things being torn down, but except for a few tourists, I didn't see anybody there.
Well, the problem is that there is now, at last, some building development going on in the central, right in the core of the central city area. So there are some buildings coming out of the ground. But the problem is that it's like a chicken and egg type situation. There isn't really a reason to go there at the moment. There is the container mall, which is a sort of temporary retail facility built out of shipping containers. But that's been reasonably successful, but it's quite a small scale. And the problem is that prior to the earthquake, a lot of the central city businesses relied for their customers on people who worked at the office buildings in the vicinity. And so, although the retail sort of uses, some retail uses are back in the central city, we haven't got the office population back in the central city to provide sort of the street life yet.
And some of that will happen when the government offices.
That's right. I mean, so when the buildings underway now are actually full of people, then it's going to be populate the streets more and make the retailing more viable as well.
There's another thing that's going on downtown. There's this huge swathe of land for a park. They do.
cut across
and
the
we're
city.
stuck now in this
And
whole
what's the motivation
preservation
there?
thing.
Well,
I think everything should be preserved.
the central city plan
no matter
basically,
how ugly, how bad,
before
how
the
awful.
earthquake,
And cities
the
are
centre of the city
evolving things.
was
They're not static.
basically spread too thinly and not concentrated enough. So there was a lot of two-level, two-story Victorian era buildings, which basically the ground floor was used for retailing and the upper floors were not used for anything. So there was an attempt in the city, in the design for the new central city, to concentrate the city within a smaller area, and to do that, two large areas, the south frame and the east frame, would sort of designate it as largely green spaces. And
So you're going to use the green to force a center.
that's right. This was the plan, to force a centre. But that concept to some extent has started to be watered down a little bit.
Oh.
And the government has, because of the costs involved, have sort of wavered a little bit on the extent of the green frame, especially to the south. And so the green frame is designed to constrain the city and concentrate the city and to basically define the downtown area. But not really a lot has happened with the green frame at the moment. I mean, again, it's a work in progress, and I think part of the problem for recovery is it's a long process. And
that's kind of my last question. It is a long process. People become impatient. Things that are planned don't happen. What is the biggest thing that's been planned that has to happen to make this work? In New Orleans, it was the hospital. What is it you have that'll be the nugget that will move this along?
I think for the downtown area, it will be probably two things really. There's the terraces development at one end overlooking the river.
Terrace?
The terraces development.
Terrace,
so that's
okay.
a mixed use hospitality, bars and restaurants, office space, and some accommodation, commercial. And adjacent to that, there's another very large building being built, which is again a sort of mixed use. And they will basically create the new sort of like focus of the downtown area. Now they are now under construction, and so when they are complete and open, then I think people will then see that there is life going back into the central city. So I'm hopeful that will then get a little bit more inertia, a bit more of a roll on happening into the central city.
The old theme when I came to Christchurch was the church. So what's the theme now?
Well, I think the thing is, I think the church, the debate over the Christchurch Cathedral has basically sort of taken so long that's been sort of taken out of the picture to a certain degree.
So
and the centre of gravity has been moving over towards the river. So I think the Avon River will now.
So the river will be the theme.
Yeah.
So visitors will come for the river.
And the thing is, in the river, of course, is still there, and you can still walk alongside the river. Whereas looking at the sort of like the damaged cathedral is probably a little bit depressing. Whereas I mean, there's something still going on with the river that's quite a pleasant.
Well, here's a thought for you. The old damaged cathedral is going to be something people want to take pictures of for maybe 30, 40, 50 years. Why not build a new cathedral nearby and leave the old one pretty much as it is?
I mean, I think that has been talked about as well. But the Anglican Church have been adamant that they want to do something on that site, and they own the site. So that is a very big controversy for Christchurch. And unfortunately, really, because it's worn people down, just that debate.
It happens in every city. There's some debate. It was a memorial in New York, as you know.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Remember that one? In New Orleans, it was bringing back the downtown and of course the arguments over the bayous, and of course the black neighborhoods, those arguments. And Oakland and Berkeley was over the recentering of the downtowns.
Okay, yeah.
So there's always a debate like this.
It's interesting, yeah. Because I mean, it does seem that the same types of issues play out.
So there are themes in recovery, and I think one of them that for me is you have to have a central idea, or these debates just keep going on and on and on. And once the New Yorkers got over this, the central idea is rebuilding that building, the Freedom Tower, and the monument can be part of that, the debate was over.
I think in Christchurch, part of the problem has been lack of leadership. We needed
the vision.
We needed a visionary leader, and we haven't really had one. So that's part of the problem.
Well, that's you, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
That's been great. So I don't know.
Tune in the next time for more hope, more opportunities to build great cities. The future will be made by all of us. Please watch Blakely City Talk. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you. Goodbye.